What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, June 21st, 2011 here. And just getting into the week here. The phone lines are open. Number, as always, 877-342-6673. 877-342-6673. Brett is in the control room, twiddling the dials and answering the phones when you call in to share whatever it is that you want to talk about today. And obviously today we start off by saying happy summer solstice. It's officially the start of summer. The sun is at the very northernmost point of the Analemma pattern out there in the sky, and it's swimsuit weather. It's let's dance around and play in the swimming pool. Unless you're in Colorado, it was snowing there yesterday. And I did check just before we went to airtime. The snow that fell here in Hawaii about a week and a half ago, that has melted. The temperature on the top of Mauna Kea right now is a very, very balmy few degrees above freezing. And still the carbon Nazis are out there. They've changed tactics. Now they're not worried about the weather in the earth. Now it's the oceans. Ooh, carbon bad for the oceans. You've got to pay us a carbon tax. We'll talk about that later in the show here. I want to go back to a couple of things that we're mentioning here in this news break. And they're talking about how the debate has gone on about raising the debt ceiling in Congress, which is, we have to plunge the taxpayers deeper into debt to the bankers as the only way to move our country forward, which, of course, is completely nonsense. But they made a very, very telling comment in the story where they said that raising the debt ceiling won't fix the economy, which is absolutely true. It just puts off the hard decisions a little while, and that is why in the end, Congress will raise the debt ceiling because they want all of the really hard decisions put off until after next year's elections. Then they're going to come in there and say, gee, we're sorry, but we need to give all your money to the bankers, and, we're going to have to shut down the schools, and we're going to have to close the hospitals, and we're sorry the bridges are collapsing, but, and we're sorry that everything's flooding because the levees have all failed, but we don't have money for them anymore. We got to give it all to the bankers because you know the rules. You know the rules of the system that you were born into. The Federal Reserve just creates money out of thin air to loan to you and to loan to the government, but the government and the people are not allowed to create that money out of thin air to pay them back. And golly gee shuckies, that's just the way the gods have decreed it to be, and you're just going to have to live with that. So that's basically what's going on. They're going to do a lot of grandstanding so that they can talk about it going into next year's election, but in the end, they will raise the debt ceiling because they don't want to have the really bad news coming in until after the election. But it's going to come anyway. You need to understand that. Now, the other story I wanted to comment on that came in on the news break where they're talking about Newt Gingrich's campaign for president, and he's still in there, and he's going to be a candidate, and he's had all of his top aides quit, and his top fundraisers just quit because apparently he's just spending money left and right in wild, reckless abandon, and people are wondering, why is he still going on with this thing? When it's obvious he can't even get support among his own supporters, why would anybody else give him any credibility? And what's going on here is a very simple rule. Candidates, they raise these campaign war chests from donations, and the money is carried forward from campaign to campaign to campaign. But after the last campaign, when the candidate decides to retire from public life, he gets to keep that money that's accumulated in his campaign war chest. I don't think Gingrich really thinks he's going to win the White House. He's just going to campaign, and he's going to go back to all of his supporters and hit them up for a little bit more money, and he's going to have a good old time trying to do it, and then he'll retire from public life, and that's more money for him to spend on his retirement. I think that's what's going on here. Because he certainly is not running a very credible campaign right now with his top people quitting left and right here. Now, obviously, and again, the economy continues to be what should be uppermost in most people's minds. With this Ponzi scheme, Federal Reserve System basically driving us all into poverty. And there was a story we ran yesterday, but I wanted to call attention to it today. A gentleman in his mid-50s in North Carolina spent basically pretty much his whole working life working for Coca-Cola, played by the rules, worked hard, paid his taxes, his union dues, don't rock the boat, sell the product, stick to your schedule, doing what you're supposed to do. Then he got let go from his job with Coca-Cola and, tried to drive a truck, tried to work in a convenience store. Been paying into Social Security and Medicare all this time. And when his savings ran out and he couldn't work at the convenience store anymore because of his medical industries, he tried to apply for Social Security, and they said, "We're sorry, all you qualify for is food stamps." And so what he did is he walked into a bank, and he said, "Please don't get upset. I need to rob $1 from you. And after I'm done stealing $1 from you, I'm going to sit over here while you call the police." And basically, that means that he's got 3 hots in a cot. He's going to go to jail, where prisoners are guaranteed medical care for their medical problems. And this is his way of getting the medical treatment that he desperately needs. He can't get it anywhere else. I'm wondering if he listens to the show, because I think it was only about 2 weeks ago I was saying to the homeless, look, if you're homeless and there's no other options, go rob a convenience store. Get sent to jail. It's a roof, it's a cot, and it's meals. It's certainly safer than living on the streets. You got all those bars to keep the bad people from getting in at you every day. And I know it sounds absurd, but if you're living on the streets, if you have been homeless, that's a very creative way of solving the problem. If the government is not going to be bothered trying to bring the jobs back so that we can take care of ourselves, just game the system so the government takes care of you. It's what Wall Street's been doing all this time. Find a way to just get the government to take care of us. Got a caller on the line, Clint in Las Vegas. Aloha, Clint. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
I'm hanging in there.
I just wanted to say that, like I said on previous shows that, okay, at the end of this month I go on 3 months, and GMAC, the company I won't name, has been huffing and puffing, and we're going to foreclose on. I've been going around talking to people like mediators and all this. I want all the listeners to know that the experts around here, I live in Las Vegas, and they're saying you might be looking at a year just to receive a due on foreclosure, because they are so far behind.
They're so backed up. Yeah.
Yeah, and she says that they're actually walking on eggshells because they know everybody's mad. And when I went to the store today, I found something like you and other guys have been talking about, that if you start talking about this stuff, you notice something, that everybody feels the way you do.
They all start agreeing. I mean, I walk into the bank today and I say, gosh darn that Federal Reserve, and all the tellers applaud. That's how bad it's gotten out here.
And I tell people, hey, just Google Wells Fargo caught dealing drugs, and you won't be able to type it in before the autofiller will fill it in for you.
Yeah, lots of leads.
Yeah, $375 billion. They got away with it. They only got fined $100 million. Crime does pay for these people. And
it absolutely does. I mean, look how it paid for Wall Street. I mean, the biggest financial fraud in history, the mortgage-backed security fraud. Alan Greenspan is admitting that it happened. They all got rich. They dumped the losses on the American people. Have you seen one of those Wall Street CEOs wearing handcuffs and getting put in a police car yet? I mean, Bear Stearns was caught pledging mortgages into multiple investment packages. That is criminal felony fraud. Nobody got arrested. When Congress investigated, they basically came out with this thing saying, well, the fault and the blame is really spread across everybody. It's a systemic problem, and it would be unfair to single anybody out for prosecution, which is another way of saying that when you're wealthy, you do not have to pay for your crimes in this country.
Right. And that's another thing this lady came and told me about. And, all I want to do, Mike, is just take 6 months of my loan, right, and put it on the back end. They'll make money on compound interest. I'm not looking for something for nothing. And the lady says, you're not really being unreasonable here. And I've lived here a long time. My house is paid off in 6 years. I get to retire in 6 months. And so, you're going to throw me out on the street now? And she goes, you're not asking for nothing unreasonable. She goes, but I tell you what, you mentioned the things you're mentioning to me now, and they really have a way of backing off. The people who call you don't have any power. It's when you go to the mediator.
Yeah,
And
when you go in there, they're the ones who can basically make the decisions, and you're absolutely right. They are so afraid of provoking an Egypt-like revolution or an Icelandic revolution here in the United States of America. They're treading gently. They're going after the people they can convince to pay out of guilt or a sense of obligation, but the people fighting back and saying, look, I didn't create this mess, and I shouldn't have to pay for it. Yeah, they are backing off right now because they understand that we are so close to a revolution here. We got to take a break here. Thanks a lot for the call. Okay, Clint, stay with me. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And Clint, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I think you said you had one more thing you wanted to talk about.
Well, okay, we had that nuke over there in Nebraska, and now me being in the pipe fitting instrument tech trade, and I've worked on these for a living. I can't help but think they have enough time to get to make preparations to get emergency pumps where they need to be gotten. I just can't foresee another Fukushima happening unless it's done deliberately. It's beyond me.
I don't think anybody would want it to do it deliberately because, I mean, General Electric and the entire nuclear power industry are already, staggering under the load of world condemnation. And there is even more bad information coming about the state of nuclear reactors here in the United States of America that we're going to mention further on.
Yeah.
The situation, the problem there with Fort Calhoun is it is already an island in the middle of floodwaters. So there is a limit to what can be brought to the site to deal with this crisis. What they need are emergency generators and pumps that are up on scaffolding to keep it out of the water, and that they do not have. So we'll see what happens. The floodwater is still continuing to rise. It's just bit by bit. We have to keep an eye on that. Clint, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Have a good day there. Got a couple of interesting emails during the break. One wrote in, said, I have been a homeless man many times myself, and I can vouch that your suggestion works. A brick thrown through a store window in the dead of winter will get you fed, clothed, and housed through the cold. Granted, the jails are kept cold to reduce bacterial growth and to make prisoners huddle and be still, but when it gets down or below the teens outside, jails are warm by comparison. Been there, done that. So, yeah, I guess this is just an aspect of the really rough economy that we have right here, right now. All righty, let's see, moving right along. 34 individuals have filed pro se involuntary Chapter 11 bankruptcy petition against Bank of America. Bank of America saying, oh, you're just being silly. But we'll see what the courts are going to say about that. I think more and more as the criminality of the banking system in Wall Street becomes apparent, the possibility of civil lawsuits against the banks is becoming very, very real. And if that fails, of course, then it's time for the pitchforks and torches and tar and feathering and so forth and so on. Other indications of the real status of the American economy every day. 18 United States war veterans are committing suicide. They go off to Iraq and Afghanistan. They come home. They can't find a job. They wind up homeless. The government that took their service and risked their lives and limb in conquests of foreign oil fields and making the world safe for compound interest just turns their backs on them. And they're committing suicide in record numbers. Talk about the unkindest cut of all. Over in California, it has come out after careful analysis of the budget that California is spending more money on its prison system than on education. That tells you just how seriously skewed and sick the nation has become. The United States has the highest per capita prison population of any industrialized nation. The United States throws more people in prison on a percentage basis than any other nation around the world. I know we're seeing, there's this little piece of propaganda on TV called Locked Up Abroad, and it's all about these people who went to other countries and they did something stupid, and they get locked up in these very horrible jails. And the whole story, it's sort of like the TV serialization of Midnight Express. You know, I went to Turkey and I tried to smuggle heroin. Oh, they're being mean to me now. Yeah, you went into their country and you started smuggling drugs, and they take that stuff very, very seriously. But the reality is, for as much as they want to bash the prison systems in all of these other countries, we have more of our own citizens in prison per capita basis than any other industrialized nation. And now we're finding out more of our tax money is being spent on these prisons. then on our educational system. Talk about a set of screwed up priorities. Now, on the international scene, as you probably have already heard by now, the government of Greece, just by the narrowest of margins, has survived the confidence vote. And now they're saying the stage is now set for the passage of austerity measures, which are being demanded by the IMF and the European Union Common Bank, or Central Bank, as a requirement for further loans. And basically what the IMF and ECB are saying to Greece is the only solution to your debt problem is to throw your people further into debt. And, of course, the Greek people are not happy with that at all. They understand that this is going to make the bankers rich, it's going to make the politicians rich, and it's going to strip mine their country. In fact, there was a very telling statement made in the Greek parliament shortly after the vote of confidence passed. And this was Alexis Tsipras, head of the opposition, and he said, this is not a program to salvage the economy. It's a program for pillage before bankruptcy. And he's absolutely right, because a large part of these austerity measures that the IMF are demanding is the privatization of all of the public assets of Greece, including tourist attractions, the archaeological wonders, all the roads and infrastructure that the Greek people have paid taxes to build and maintain over the years for their own use, are now going to be sold to private interests who will turn around and rent those facilities back to the people who initially paid for them. And that's why the Greek people are upset, because it's their property the government is selling off to meet the demands of the IMF. And it could be argued that the government doesn't have the right to do those sales. If the government is just a custodian of the nation, they don't have the right to sell the nation to get out of the financial mess they got themselves into. I mean, does the janitor have a right to sell the school's assets if he's running out of money? No, he doesn't. He is paid and hired to take care of the school, but that does not make him the owner of it. So just something to think about. We're going to take a break for some commercials. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking briefly about the situation over in Greece. The protests are still growing. This vote of confidence for the Greek government is really the government voting for itself. It's just the Greek legislature voting and saying, yeah, we'll go along with the prime minister a little bit longer. And he just barely survived it. It was a very, very narrow election victory. But the Greek people are not happy with this direction. This, you must make do with less so we can give the bankers more. And they understand the IMF, like the Federal Reserve, they just print the money up and hand it out, and you have to work full face value plus accruing interest to pay it back. And, of course, you can never pay it all back, because when you have a debt-based currency, the instant that first paper note goes into circulation, more money is owed to that private central bank than is actually in existence. And it stays that way. It's designed that way. That whole debt-based private central bank model is designed to plunge everybody who uses it hopelessly into debt as a means of enslavement to the owners of the bank. And the Greeks don't want to be slaves. The Icelandic people don't want to be slaves. The Egyptians don't want to be slaves. The British don't want to be slaves. Got major strikes coming up there in another couple of weeks. And I don't want to be a slave, and you don't want to be a slave, do you? So this is probably going to get very, very ugly. Meanwhile, back here, and this is kind of relating to what I was talking about with Clint here, J.P. Morgan has been fined $155 million over their commission of fraud in this whole mortgage-backed security scandal. Wow, $155 million! Isn't that amazing? Well, to you and me, that's a lot of money. But to J.P. Morgan, it's pocket change compared to how much they made on the front end of this mortgage-backed security fraud. They cleaned up billions and billions of dollars. According to Dylan Ratigan, the total cost to the American people of this mortgage-backed security fraud has been $27 trillion, and that is with a T. Not a B, a T. $27 trillion. I leave it as an exercise for you, the listener, to get out your calculator and divide $27 trillion by the current population of the United States of America to find out what your share of this is. So J.P. Morgan gets hit with a fine that is basically a wrist slap. Those executives who made these decisions to engage in the fraud don't pay that fine. It comes out of the earnings or the bailout money. Ultimately, the stockholders are made to pay for this, and so are the customers. The losses get spread around on all the people down below. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer. That is the essence of a fascist economic state. Meanwhile, over in Washington, D.C., the finest government that money can buy, we are seeing an effort by Senators Kerry and McCain to try and get around the fact that President Barack Obama is currently in violation of the War Powers Act. They want to retroactively approve the military action in Libya. They can't. There is a provision in the Constitution of the United States of America called ex post facto. You may not pass a law declaring something to be legal or illegal after the fact. Kerry and McCain are trying to do an end run around the limitations on the executive branch and their war-making capacity, and they're doing it in violation of the Constitution of the United States of America. They're basically ignoring the law. They're saying, well, just do this and it'll sound good in the media. And those corporate media people will say, see, they found a way to do it. And no, they didn't. It is unconstitutional to retroactively legislate on anything. All they can do is attempt to say, we're going to repeal the War Powers Act right now, which would exonerate all future violations of it, and as a matter of practicality would end all prosecutions for a former crime that is now legal, just as a matter of practicality, but it does not excuse the crime. And certainly in the fact that this crime is still being committed, which is the war in Libya. Because, gosh darn it, we can't let Gaddafi have his own state bank issuing a value-based currency, because that would just destroy all these private central banks. That's the reason they went after Hitler. Remember, when Hitler started out, he was a good guy. By getting rid of the reserve banking system that had been imposed on Germany by the Treaty of Versailles, by getting rid of the debt-based currency system that had plunged Germany into this incredible inflation where it took literally a bushel basket of the paper notes to get a loaf of bread or a cord of wood. In fact, it was cheaper to burn the notes in your stove than to buy wood to burn in the stove. And Adolf Hitler, and I'm not a Hitler fan because he screwed up at the end and he destroyed his own nation, and I think that gets an F- when we score leadership. But he set up his own government-issued currency based on a unit of worth, which is exactly what George Washington and the boys did in 1776. And he turned Germany's economy around so brilliantly, he was Time Magazine's Man of the Year. They were cheering this guy for this incredible economic miracle that he'd done in Germany. Except, of course, the private central bankers were not happy with this. And so they organized a global boycott against Germany for the express purpose of destroying Germany's new economy before the rest of the world saw what was being done with a government-issued value-backed currency and how well it was working for the people. And it was that boycott and the hostility arising from that boycott by the bankers that set the conditions for World War II, where the German people were just furious that they had been working themselves back from the enslavement of the bankers, and the bankers came in and said, we will destroy your nation, we will destroy your economy, unless you agree to go back to living in slavery to private central banks. And that was really the foundations of what became World War II. You'll never be taught that in your schools, of course. You're taught in the schools that bankers are good people. They only loan out money that savings depositors put in there, which, of course, we all know is a crock. And that was the origin of that war. Now, like I said, I'm not a Hitler fan because he screwed up and he destroyed his own country, and that gets an F- in my book. But how he was put in a position of having to look at war as a solution was an organized global boycott because he dared run his nation without a private central bank. We've had 3 of these private central banks in the United States of America, and all 3 of them have brought us to the edge of disaster. And yet the bankers won't let go because they're addicts. They're money junkies. They've got to have every last penny in their pocket. And they don't care about the damage they do to the society around them. That's why I call them junkies. We've all seen drug junkies, heroin junkies, cocaine junkies, meth heads. They just want that next fix, and they don't care who they hurt to get it. Meanwhile, we have House Representatives Crystal Abrams and Kagan are pushing the Republican Party to back what they are now branding as the 5th war of Muslim liberation, which is, of course, to perpetuate the war in Libya, which is not about liberating the Libyans because we're bombing and killing them. NATO's admitting, yeah, we're bombing civilians. We're sorry about that, really, but we got to keep going. We've got to get Gaddafi. No, what they want to get is his state bank and the gold dinar. That is the target of this war. We're going to take a break for commercials. Join us on the air, 877-342-6673. We will be right back.
We will not go down in the night without a fight. You can burn up our mosques and our homes and our schools, but our spirit will never die. We will not go down in Gaza tonight.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, yesterday we were talking about how the TSA has just really kind of gone overboard, and that snow globes, little glass globes with a little floaty snow and your picture or a statue of a Swiss chalet or something in there, are basically being confiscated because you can't have liquid on board those airplanes unless it's in the little tiny bottles and the bags and everything like that. And it's almost kind of absurd. I guess you could get around it with a kit-form snow globe where you get the globe and the snow and the statue, and when you get home you add tap water. Just add water, instant snow globe or something like that. But it just seems an absurd level of behavior for the TSA when you consider that in all the years they've been in operation, they haven't actually found a single real terrorist. Not one. Absolutely not. So somebody sent me this article from the San Francisco Chronicle. I'm not 100% sure if this is really true or not, but the article is written as if this is absolutely fact. Basically, the gist of the article is that while you're not allowed to have snow globes or anything like that, and your carry-on luggage on the airplane, sex toys are okay. The Transportation Safety Administration, whose job it is to protect the traveling public, has apparently said that items that are on the list of things that can be taken into the cabin in your carry-on luggage include vibrators, whips, chains, leashes, restraints, and manacles, for sex play. And but if you have lubricants to use those, they have to be in the approved little containers. So I'm guessing what's going on here is the TSA perverts, after looking at all the young hotties in the naked body scanners, I guess they're looking for that next thrill. They're getting burned out on just seeing the naked babe, so now they're looking for that next erotic thrill. And I hate to spoil the party for everybody, but in the hands of somebody who knows how to use it, a whip is a lethal weapon. But again, it's just sort of the way the government thinks or doesn't think and goes on and does what it does. Now, in a more serious note, however, we're beginning to find out more and more that the items that are taken from travelers, if they don't wind up being sold on eBay by some TSA guy who's running a theft ring, the actual confiscated items that are confiscated and accounted for officially are being sold. They're being sold. All those millions of nail clippers and Swiss Army knives and whatever else is going on there that is being taken from passengers, they're being sold at government surplus stores to raise extra revenue. This is pillage. This is what pillage is. The government just takes things from you of value and sells them to raise money. And they say, it's for your own protection that we're taking. No, it isn't. They're using it to raise money. They're so desperate for money to keep worshiping at the altar of the first church of the holy fiat currency. They're taking this stuff and they're selling it. They're basically selling stolen goods. Because the TSA says, I have a legal right to steal from you. That's what pillage is, where the ruling party says these people can steal from you whenever they feel like it. That's what pillage is, and that's where we are. Now, down in Texas, as you're probably aware, there was an effort to pass legislation to ban TSA crotch groping. TSA is down there saying all your crotch belong to us, and people are very, very upset about it. Former Miss USA, war veterans, guys coming home from the war they're in wheelchairs with their Purple Heart and their battle medals, and the TSA is saying, I got to grab your junk. So down in Texas, they're talking about passing a law that would make it a felony. Year in jail, $4,000 for any TSA worker to touch certain bodily parts of a person for the purpose of granting access to a building or a form of transportation. In other words, the legislation would make it a crime to say, you're not allowed to get on the airplane until I can touch your breasts or your buttocks or your genitalia area. Now, the TSA came in and said, we will simply ban all air traffic inside Texas because we have the right to do that. If we cannot guarantee the safety of the air traffic inside Texas, we'll ground all the airplanes. And the legislature backed down. Well, now Governor Perry has reintroduced the legislation into this final legislative session in Texas. It's going to go through the 29th. It has not been voted on yet, but it's on the docket to be put before the legislature. Now, he may be doing this to grandstand a little bit because Perry is rumored to be considering a run for president next year. And taking a stand against TSA is a great way to win popular support right now. And blocking the bill, if he dares do that, his candidacy is going to be dead before it even gets out the gate. So that is probably going to prompt a constitutional challenge over the issue of states' rights and whether states have the right to pass a law saying you will not harass our travelers anymore. And if Texas does pass that, I'm going to be right down here at our legislative building here in Honolulu saying we need the same law here before we are all homeless and hungry and living in the alleys because TSA is destroying our tourism here. Now, if you're having to deal with TSA and they get in your face about why don't you like what we're doing, as they give you some sexually transmitted disease, the next time TSA is harassing you, just ask them one question. Just ask them, when was the last time TSA actually found a real terrorist? And, of course, it's a trick question. They never have. Not one. Not one. All the dropped laptops, all the terrorized and harassed women, and even some men, all the humiliation. It doesn't serve any purpose. It doesn't make us any safer. Even Department of Homeland Security says air travel is no safer now than before 9/11. It's just big business. There's a lot of bucks in that, so they keep going here. Now, one of the reasons why I think Perry is doing this to grandstand for a run at the White House is he's also, he just signed a law that exempts incandescent light bulbs that are manufactured and sold inside the state of Texas are exempt from the federal government's requirement for the 2007 Energy Independence Act. This is the law that says you must have compact fluorescents in your home, and you're not allowed to have tungsten light bulbs. Well, here's my act of defiance right there for Governor Perry and for all Americans. It's my Edison-style tungsten light bulb that I keep here. And I applaud Governor Perry for this, and I'm not talking about being wasteful for energy, but the way this bill came into being, you need to pay attention to it. Because the 2007 Energy Independence Act was actually put together by General Electric lobbyists. Remember, General Electric is the company whose motto post-Fukushima is, we make the world glow. And they wrote this legislation to say we must have energy-efficient light bulbs. And they basically set the standards for energy efficiency so that only their compact fluorescent bulbs could meet those requirements. So they basically wrote this bill to get you to buy their light bulb and to make it illegal to buy any other kind of light bulb. Then they turned around and they moved their manufacturing for the compact fluorescents over to China. Thanks a lot, General Electric. Now, when Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, he didn't need an act of Congress to ban candles and oil lamps as fire hazards to force people to buy his product. The public instantly saw the electric light bulb was a major step forward. Now, such is not the case with the compact fluorescent bulb. It's very expensive compared to its tungsten ancestor. And while glass and tungsten are very stable materials that do not degrade or produce toxic runoff in landfills, compact fluorescent bulbs contain mercury. They contain toxic chemicals in the electronic components that can leach into groundwater. And there's actually a radioactive isotope used inside the bulb itself that creates a little ionization path for the electric arc to start that lights up the bulb. Without that radioisotope, they have a very, very hard time starting. When broken, these bulbs are a health hazard. Now, when General Electric did the calculation showing that their compact fluorescent bulbs met the requirement of the 2007 Energy Independence Act, they based it on a 5-year lifespan for the compact fluorescents. But if your experience is like mine, the bulbs just don't last that long. We've had them fail after just a couple of months. So we have to go out and buy more of these very expensive bulbs and throw the old ones into the trash. And yes, it says on the package you must dispose of as a hazardous waste. We know most people aren't going to do that. They pull out the old bulb, they throw it in the trash, they put the new bulb in, and they keep on going. Now, technically, this is a moot argument because the LED lighting is starting to mature. There are already LED bulbs, especially decorative lamps, are already in the stores, and the price is starting to come down where it makes a lot of sense to buy an LED bulb because they are highly efficient and they don't have the toxic problems of the compact fluorescent bulbs. I have no doubt that the manufacturers of the LED lamps are trying to figure out a way they can shorten the lifespan so that we have to go back to buying bulbs on a regular basis, because an LED light that lasts forever is a really, really lousy business model. But I digress. But Governor Perry, in basically pushing for light bulb freedom, I think he's going to find a lot of resonance with the American people, because even Hitler didn't go into the homes of the German people and say, you will use this kind of lighting in your home. Even he didn't go that far. He couldn't get away with that. Only Americans will put up with that kind of crap. So Perry is doing some things which are going to make him very, very popular, TSA and the compact fluorescent bulbs. But let's be honest, they're fringe issues. They're peripheral. He's not addressing the core problems with the nation, such as Federal Reserve and the wars and the economy and the homelessness, the way that Ron Paul has. So, Governor Perry, I wish you a lot of luck, and you're doing a lot of good here in your quest for the White House. But Governor Perry, you're no Ron Paul, and I don't think you're ever likely to be. All right, we're almost here at the top of the hour. Last little question. As it turns out, in studying the charter for the Federal Reserve, it turns out that Congress can actually shut it down simply by paying the owners of the Federal Reserve the original $1 billion that the Federal Reserve loaned to the government back in 1913. There is an escape clause, a back-out clause in there, and there's no reason not to use it. Except, of course, the Federal Reserve takes a lot of that money that they're making from you off of the interest-bearing public currency, and they use it to reward congresspeople for keeping them in power. And there's also this historical precedent that anybody standing up to the bankers, like Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy, some strange coincidence, they wind up dead very quickly. We're going to take a break for news and commercials. We'll be back here in about 7 minutes, and hopefully some of you will call in hour number 2. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to hour number 2 of our show today, and we're going to go right to the phones. George from Texas. Aloha, George. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing okay. Can you speak up a little tiny bit?
You heard about the head of the BATF being caught lying before Congress, and that he might have to resign his post, right?
Oh, my heart bleeds for him.
Well, the thing is, the tone of this scandal and Major League Baseball.
Now, let me back up here a second. You're talking about how the BATF was literally giving guns to drug criminals in Mexico, ostensibly to track where they went, but it wound up basically they were arming these warring drug factions in Juarez, and like a lot of people have been killed with those guns the U.S. government supplied. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But like I say, they didn't treat it with the seriousness like they did with steroids in Major League Baseball. And the only difference is Major League Baseball, the athletes are only hurting themselves, and the BATF, they're killing thousands of people by their actions. And it's like, they're talking... Like
sports events, that's, the national sport. That's what's important. That's what the American people care about, or at least that's what we're told we're supposed to care about. You're absolutely right. We have these situations where, anything the government wants to make a big political case of, they'll spend tons and tons of money on it, and then, anything they want to go away, they give it token funding, and that's kind of the end of it.
Well, it's more like I don't hear no calls for the head of the BATF people lying before Congress being jailed, indicted, fined, censured, or anything like that. But boy, they want to throw Bobby Bonds in jail, or somebody, or Roger Clemens.
Oh, remember the big thing they made over who was the guy who was involved in the dog fighting? I'm blanking
Michael
on
Vick.
it. Yeah, was it Michael Vick and the big? Oh, it was horrible. And he's doing the dog fighting, and we're bombing kids. All over the Middle East, little children are being blown to bloody bits by guns and bombs and weapons supplied by the United States of America, and that's okay. But Michael Vick is abusing a dog, horror upon horrors. And I'll tell you why they do that, okay? Because they understand that most Americans are quite altruistic. We want to feel that we're working to make a better world. And what the government will do, let me finish this off. What the government will do is, in order to give us a way to feel like we're making the world better without challenging the government's agenda, they'll set up these little things like animal cruelty and cruelty to whales and beating the seals and all these other things that will be put out there and funded and promoted. So people who will feel like they want to make a better world, they'll get involved in these things and they'll stay out of the way of the government. And that's really why you see the media making a big deal about Michael Vick or sports steroids or all these other things, because they want you to just exhaust your sense of caring and your sense of duty getting involved in this stuff. What was that line from Shakespeare? Keep busy, giddy minds. I think that's in Henry V, if I recall correctly. And that's basically is keep them distracted, keep them not looking at the things that are really mattering right now. And that's why, again, they're waving this gay marriage around as the hot button issue going into 2012's election season.
Well, the thing is, I'm doing a little bit of my research, and I'm putting this down. My fellow Christians are going to hate me. I'm going to say the religious right is a liability to this nation, because they're going against anti-abortion. And they think when Roe v. Wade gets overturned that abortion is going to be illegal. I said, no, it won't. It will just revert it back to the states. It ain't going to make it illegal. People don't seem to realize that anymore.
Well, again, and they're going to crank that up as an issue and saying, we've got to resolve this once and for all. And it's all a distraction, because the last thing the incumbents want you to be making your vote decisions on is the economy and the wars and the deterioration of the United States infrastructure. And yes, I know there's a lot of vote fraud out there. I'm one of the ones pointing to that factor. But remember, vote fraud can only shift an election a few percentage points. It can't reverse an overwhelming landslide without really being obvious about it. And so if the American people vote their wallets, and if they vote their wallets, unfortunately, it just means the Republicans are going to be back in, and they started this mess. But the Democrats campaigned on change, and we didn't get any change. We just got more of the same. But I think this is going to be a really bad election for the incumbents, and the only way that they can save their job is to trick you into thinking that abortion and gay marriage and animal rights and all the other stuff, is the hot button issue that you should be concerned about. And nobody's going to be concerned about the war and the economy going into the election. That's going to be the conventional wisdom we'll get out of the media.
No, like for me, it's more like these social conservative issues, like you say, gay marriage, abortion. Yeah, they're important, but I think that should be left up to the states to decide. And that should not be a federal issue, and it should be a issue of state rights. It shouldn't be a national issue. And, it's just like government distracting us with all these issues. And, with the voter fraud and with the politics, I think...
Yeah, but it goes beyond that. I mean, we can see right there you're falling into the trap. You're spending your time arguing whether it should be a federal or state issue. I'm not interested. Okay? Listen. I'm not gay and I'm not pregnant. But I've got family who are fighting these wars right now, and like everybody else in this country, I am struggling to make ends meet financially. So the wars and the economy are the top most important issues to me going into this election. And, don't get me wrong, I have a lot of sympathy for the gay community, and I think they should have, marriage or whatever they want to call it. But that doesn't affect me, and it doesn't affect the majority of Americans. It's being used as a distraction. The abortion issue, the people who are arguing it back and forth, they don't care about abortion rights. They're merely using it as a distraction. They're desperate to get you to vote on anything other than the economy and the wars. And those really are the big issues.
Yeah,
okay?
In the two-party monopoly system.
Well, we were never supposed to have a two-party system. The only reason we have a two-party system is that it helps the corporations save money because they only have to bribe 2 candidates ahead of every election instead of the 5 or 6 under the system we had when the nation started.
Yeah, you're right. I said all those issues are just distraction issues. Nothing really changes no matter who gets in office. That's all.
Yeah, that's very much it,
And it's just, the thing is, it's more like if Rick Perry was the front runner for the Republicans and Obama was the front runner for the Democrats, it's like choosing between the Dixie Mafia and the Chicago Mob. You have your choice.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, the fact that Perry is really involving himself in these peripheral issues and not dealing with the core problems the way Ron Paul is, it tells me that, yeah, he's no better than Obama is. And I hope he's handed his hat quickly because I really think, Ron Paul is it. If we don't get him in there, the country is absolutely lost. It may be lost anyway. We may work hard to get Ron Paul in the White House just so that he gets to handle as the whole thing falls apart, which wouldn't be fair to him after all of his years of service. All right, we're going to let you go, George. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call. I want to get back to a topic we talked about in one of the earlier phone calls today. It turns out, obviously, with what happened in Fukushima, and the awareness that there are at least 3 other nuclear power stations in Japan in varying degrees of difficulty right now, and all of them virtually are in trouble because they weren't really being maintained at the proper level of safety that was supposed to happen. More and more people are starting to take a closer look at reactors here in the United States of America. And I'm not talking about the ones at Cooper and Fort Calhoun, which are really just edging closer and closer to being flooded out. We're talking about the other reactors around there. They're being surveyed. They're being studied. Hard on the heels of the story that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, rather than enforcing the safety standards and making the power stations do the necessary repairs, was simply adjusting the safety standards in order to recertify the nuclear power plants. Now they're finding out that in at least 48 of 65 inspected sites, radioactive tritium is leaking from these facilities through old, rusty pipes that have never been serviced or replaced. That is shocking when you find the majority of your inspections are showing leakage of radiation. That is a very dangerous situation. Now, they're only talking now about tritium. And tritium, for those of you who are not familiar with it, this is a radioactive isotope of hydrogen. It has 2 extra neutrons in the nucleus. But like all isotopes of hydrogen, it can combine chemically with oxygen and form water. It's called heavy water if you're in nuclear physics, whether it's deuterium or tritium. Forming with oxygen, it's a form of water that's slightly heavier because of the additional neutrons. It's a low-energy beta emitter. It's safe outside the body, but if you inhale it or ingest it, obviously you're being irradiated from inside. The radioactive half-life of tritium is 12.3 years. The half-life in the body is 14 days, so the exposure is kind of limited. Tritium has replaced radium in luminous dials and gun sights, and it's also a prime component in multi-stage thermonuclear weapons. It is an industrial material. I think the price is something amazing, like $12,000 a gram. And they're just leaking the stuff out through these pipes. And it's a health hazard, and it betrays that the safety of these facilities has been compromised. They're just letting these things rot away. We're looking at major problems down the road. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I want to talk a little bit more about the situation with nuclear power in this country. And I think I said a couple of weeks ago, actually a month ago, when we were talking about Fukushima, and I said, can nuclear power be made safe? And I said, yeah, I think it can. You just can't do it when the money junkies are making the safety decisions. And we had that story yesterday where the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has just been changing the safety requirements to allow these nuclear reactors to continue operating past their planned life cycle. Now, the wear and tear on a nuclear power plant is pretty heavy, mostly from the radiation, which can weaken the metal in the pressure vessel. And you get corrosion. Some of the chemicals that are used in cooling systems are highly corrosive, and these nuclear power plants are designed with a specific life cycle. They are only designed to work so many years, then you got to shut them down. You got to replace them. And the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has apparently been changing the safety requirements to allow plants to be recertified to go on making money for their owners without having to put in the capital investment to refurbish and improve and upgrade and basically just make sure that they're going to be safe. So now we have this story where apparently a great deal of leakage of radioactive material is being detected around a large number of American nuclear reactors. Now, down there along the Missouri River, we're seeing a situation, it's very, very tense, where the Cooper and Fort Calhoun nuclear power plants are surrounded by water. They've got sandbags and aqua dams, and the water is apparently within 18 inches of overtopping the defenses that they've set up. They're already talking about going and having to waterproof and barricade doors within the building itself to try and protect the generators and the pumping equipment. So it's a very, very tense situation down there. And we are hearing that levees are giving way, which actually sort of will lower the water at the reactors themselves because the water is now going someplace else. It's kind of a delicate balancing act. But some of the earthen dams are looking to overtop, and when they go, the bottom line is nobody really knows what's going to happen here. We're just going to have to sit and watch and wait for it to happen. I've been through a flood myself when I was a kid. I lived in a town in New Hampshire where there was an annual flood, and one year it was really, really bad. And it was just day after day you watch the water coming up higher and higher to, closer and closer to your home. And we lucked out. It didn't quite reach our home. But a lot of people, were very hurt by this thing. So I understand what they're going through down along the Missouri River. Now, I was doing research on another topic unrelated, and I came across a couple of interesting stories I want to share with you. First of all, I was rather shocked to find out that 1/4 of all pregnancies in the United States of America will miscarry, which tells us there's something very, very wrong with prenatal care in the United States of America. That's 25% loss. That's shocking. And I know there's a population problem, but still, that there's something very, very wrong when we have that kind of losses going on. Why are we having these losses? Well, 2 areas we may be looking at. After the 3 Mile Island disaster, citizens kept asking public health authorities and government officials, is this harming this? Are we suffering any ill effects from the radioactive contamination that we got? And 4 years after 3 Mile Island disaster, the citizens got tired of waiting for the public health department and the government agencies to come in and say, this is what's going on. And they organized their own community effort. They went door to door doing a survey on the health situation of everybody downwind from 3 Mile Island. And what they found were horrendous medical problems everywhere. At almost every single household, there was cancer, some kind of emergency problems, stillbirths, miscarriages, way in excess of what was normal for the region. Now, last week we had these stories where the rise in infant mortality in the Pacific Northwest had gone up 35% since Fukushima, when the normal rate for the entire country is only 2%. And then we had that other story where in Philadelphia there was a shocking rise in infant mortality, and one of their doctors there are saying it's probably related to the fact that radioactivity is now in the Philadelphia water supply. But neonatal, newborn deaths, Down syndromes were all attributed to 3 Mile Island's meltdown. And we know we've got radioactivity from Fukushima all over the northern hemisphere, and we may have even worse if these Nebraska power stations are flooded and they lose cooling to those spent fuel rod pools. Then I found another situation, and this one surprised me a lot. As you're probably aware, the government is trying to force this H1N1 vaccine on everybody. The swine flu vaccine, it's good for you. Actually, it isn't. Back in 1976, during the swine flu pandemic, the swine flu vaccine killed more people than the swine flu did. So just a little reminder in there. This is the new business model for the American medical establishment. We don't want to sell medicine to sick people. They die, they sue, they complain, they do malpractice thing. We're going to make money selling medicine to people who are perfectly healthy. Here, have a vaccine. And that's not to say that some vaccines are not effective, but look how many they try to give our kids. And look how many they're trying to sell us for diseases we're never likely to be exposed to in the first place. So anyway, we have this H1N1 vaccine. And apparently, the doctors they're trying to basically get pregnant women to take this vaccine because they're supposedly more at risk for this swine flu, which, remember, 2 years ago we were told it was going to be this horrendous pandemic. In fact, the CDC said it was a pandemic. Why? Because they lowered the standard for what constituted a pandemic. And it came and it went, and it wasn't any worse than the normal seasonal flu. But they made a big deal about it. They wanted to sell the vaccine. And they said, it's a monster vaccine. It combines swine flu and bird flu and human flu all in one Frankenflu thing. So we were calling it around here, we called it the when pigs fly flu, because it basically did not turn out to be the monster it was going to be, just like human-caused global warming. So anyway, if you look at the package insert on the H1N1 vaccine, it says right in it that it's not been tested on pregnant women. Now, you hold that thought. We've got to take a break for commercials. You hold that thought. We'll be right back with a real horror story. So, we're talking about the H1N1 flu vaccine. And we know there's been a big debate over thimerosal, the mercury-based preservative that has been linked to the epidemic of autism that is affecting American children right now. And then the government comes in and says, oh, no, we have decreed that there's no link between thimerosal and autism. And then in the legislation that created the Department of Homeland Security, there's a rider in there that indemnifies vaccine manufacturers from lawsuits. So even if you can prove that what they're shooting into the arms of your children is destroying them slowly and painfully, you have no legal recourse, because vaccines are necessary to the national security. And yeah, they made a mistake. Boy, they really screwed up that one, but we can't let you sue them because then the terrorists would win, or something like that. So the package insert for the H1N1 vaccine actually says that the vaccine has not been tested for safety on pregnant women. It hasn't been tested. They don't know one way or the other. And all of a sudden, we're hearing all these stories from all around the country, starting to show up on the health websites, of women who get the swine flu vaccine and within hours they have a miscarriage. Now, is this just an incredibly sloppy piece of medical work by the United States medical industry, as we have seen so many times in the past? Or is this the beginning of vaccine-based population control, as championed and funded by Bill Gates and Warren Buffett? But I personally consider it to be criminal to inject women with a vaccine whose own package and wrapper says we don't know if this is safe for pregnant women or not. And now we're seeing these stories of these hideous. It's a horrible experience to put a woman through. You know, these are women who want to be pregnant. They want to have the child. You know, and they're excited. They're pregnant. They've got the babies on the way. And then the doctor says, "Oh, you got to have this vaccine to protect your baby." And then all of a sudden, your baby is gone. But the vaccine manufacturers are making their money, so who cares, right? It's a small sacrifice. The world is overpopulated. Anyway, you know what I really dislike about the population control people? I mean, I know there's, way too many human beings on this planet. But the thing I don't like about the population control people, they always want somebody else to die to cure the population problem. Yes, the world is overpopulated. You over there, stop having children. And if you won't, we will give you medication to make you stop without your permission. So it's between a 25% miscarriage rate, even before all this problem, and the radiation and the vaccine stuff. I don't know. we may be in a situation where we're going to see the human population decline just from all the toxic oil and the Corexit and the radioactivity. So, anyway. Now, probably by now you're aware that genetically modified crops are not the wonder cure-all for starvation that they were promoted to be. In fact, it's come out repeatedly that the actual crop yield from genetically modified crops is actually lower than the natural counterparts. And these Roundup-ready plants are being planted and dosed with this glyphosate weed killer, and now the gene that protects the genetically modified crops from this very powerful weed killer has now, in the wild, because of cross-pollination, it has transferred into the weeds. So now the weed killer won't kill the weeds. The weeds have picked up the genetically modified trait of being immune to all these weed killers. So you've got all the downside and none of the upside. Now, amazingly enough, with all the problems of genetically modified crops, we are seeing reports that livestock fed on genetically modified crops are losing something like, a quarter to one-half of newborns. Fertile eggs in the incubators are dying. Cattle, they're not able to reproduce. There are no new cows being brought along. And they've traced it down to toxins that are being created by these genetically modified crops, especially when they're sprayed with this glyphosate weed killer. And what they have discovered, and we were warning about this a year ago, is that when you alter a single gene in a plant, it has unexpected and unpredictable effects in other parts of the organism's chemistry, because that big strand of DNA that is inside your cells is not a linear piece of code like a TV show or a movie or a computer program. It is very much interconnected. Everything talks to everything. When you change a gene in one part of the organism, it will have effects pretty much everywhere else, and they're not predictable. And worse, the genetically modified industry, they're not even looking. They get the effect they want, they're producing the chemical they wanted to produce, and they put it out into commercial application because that's how they make their money. And there are serious problems. And here in the United States, it is still not required by law for genetically modified crops to identify themselves as such in the store. All over Europe, it is mandatory. They understand there are questions of safety regarding these crops. It is a law in the European Union. Genetically modified crops or products containing content from genetically modified crops must be so labeled. Not here in the United States. You have no idea if what you are buying off the shelf, you have no idea if those tortillas you brought home for your tacos tonight were made from genetically modified corn, which appears to be one of the most often tinkered with products out there. So now, in what appears to be an act of ecological sabotage, if you will, the Obama administration has endorsed genetically engineered agriculture in more than 50 national wildlife refuges. In other words, they're going to go into these wildlife preserves. They were taken away from the American people, say, you can't go in there, we're preserving wildlife in there, and now the Obama administration is going to say, yeah, go in there and plant some genetically modified whatevers. Which means these are not wildlife refuges anymore, are they? They're just another taxpayer-subsidized experimental farm for the benefit of the agricultural industry, so they can hide their experimental gardens where people can't see them. See, we have a couple here on the island, and there's a lot of protesting going on. People don't want this stuff here on the island of Oahu. They put it here because if they make a mistake, they figure, it's just Oahu. They're a little tiny rock, we can buy them all off if there's a problem. And what is going to happen as these genetically modified crops continue to go wild, and they are. And there's all these insane lawsuits where the holders of the patents on these genes sue anybody whose food crops get the gene from bees, from birds, from the wind. Pollination is a fact of life. That's why plants do what they do. And it appears that allowing these plants to be planted even in the wildlife refuges, the goal is to simply wipe out the natural varieties of plants so that anything you want to buy, anything you want to eat, anything you want to grow is already pre-owned by the agricultural industry. You will be dependent on the corporations for your food from now on, and that means you will do what the corporations tell you. That seems to be the agenda. I can't think of any other reason why you would pollute a wildlife refuge with the genetically modified crops. We're going to be right back after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And just to sort of round out the idea that so much science that you are sold turns out to be utterly worthless. It's just there to sell it to you. It's snake oil. It's like the old Wild West traveling medicine show. Roll the wagon into town, crank down the stage on the back there, get up there and do a really good show and say, if you don't buy the, Professor Mike's snake oil, this hideous disease will come and get you. And you sell a bunch of the bottles and they drink it and you get your money and you ski-daddle out of town before they realize it's just pepper water. We seem to see a lot of that here in the United States of America. And a really good example, there's been apparently a disagreement over these air-dropped fire retardant chemicals. You've probably seen it any time there's a big brush fire or wildfire someplace. You'll see these airplanes coming on over, and they'll open the doors, and this bright, shining red chemical will basically come out and drop all over the ground. And the claim is that this will prevent the fires from spreading. Well, it turns out after years of study that there is absolutely no evidence that this chemical actually stops the spread of wildfires. Yes, under laboratory conditions, it appears to inhibit combustion, but by the time it comes down out of the air and is spread all over the ground, it appears to have no effect whatsoever. Worse, if it gets into water, it kills the fish. And it seems the United States government buys this chemical retardant for $30 million a year from a company in Israel. And the Forest Service says they're going to go on using it, even though it may not actually have any effect at all. They'd probably be better off taking these airplanes and converting them to water bombers, because that actually does have an impact. Of course, the problem is you can get water for free from the nearest ocean or lake, which is what a lot of these water bombers will do. But no. We got to spend $30 million a year on this bright, pretty orange chemical that looks great in the newsreel footage, but doesn't actually work and kills the fish. Yeah, that sounds about right for government work here. We're going to go to the phones. Andrea in Oklahoma. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. Yes. I'm mad and I don't want to take this government anymore. I'm ready to fire all of them.
Absolutely. I agree with you.
But and I know you're against violence, and I stay home the 15th and the 16th and the 17th, and up until today I'm still here. But there's got to be a better way than what we're doing. I mean, I know
there very much is a better way. There very much is a better way, and I do oppose violence. I joke about it a lot, but the reality is I oppose violence because it only justifies further government repression. Anytime the government wants to crack down on people, they send out the agent provocateurs to cause trouble and say, oh, look at those, whatever the designated target is. Look how bad they're behaving. We must lock them up for their own good. We're going to start seeing more and more of that about the Internet, where, all of these obviously staged, good for the media coverage, hacking attacks. We're going to see Obama coming in here during the 2012 campaign and saying, I promise I will crack down on all those computer criminals out there, meaning they'll leave the criminals alone and they will basically abuse the law-abiding citizens. It's like the TSA has responded to the foreign terrorist threat by setting up grope-your-crotch booths in all the bus and train stations all over America. Like that's really going to have any good at all. So what Obama is going to do is cure all these cyber intrusions from these foreign hackers by basically throwing locks onto the blogs here in the United States of America, and that's basically, what they're doing. And yeah, I'm angry too, but I am absolutely convinced that if they cannot continue this Ponzi scheme, this pyramid called the Federal Reserve and the IMF much longer. Something is going to break. There's going to be a collapse and a failure, and the people of the world are going to say, we will not pay anymore. We have surrendered so much of our lives to try and save this system, but we understand now it can't be saved because by design, A private central bank issuing the public currency at interest is a system that must eventually collapse. Let's let it collapse and get it over with. It's going to happen anyway. All we get by waiting is further in debt and further into poverty and further into homelessness and hunger. Let's let it crash now and save what we have left rather than pour more good money after bad.
I agree with you. I just wish it hurry up right now and happen because
I'm shoving as hard as I can.
Well, and I'm praying as hard as I can, and even though I know you don't believe in all that. But I'm still in that direction, and I hope you're right. I hope it falls tonight. Tonight would be a good night. So
tonight would be good. 4th of July would be better. I'll settle for my birthday. You know, that'd be a good birthday present. But I'll tell you what you can do. In between when you're praying, get your anger, go out there and talk to everybody you know, because the more people speak out, the more you find the courage to speak out, the more you will help other people find the courage to speak out. And you send out the message that those people who understand that the country is on a wrong path, they are not alone. And that everybody else in the room feels the same way. I'm not kidding. I walk into my bank and I say, hang the Federal Reserve, and the tellers all applaud. That's how far along we are to getting a consensus that things have got to change in this country and on this planet. Thanks a lot for the phone call, Andre. I will do my best here. All right, a couple of stories here. As you know, we have been following this whole Bitcoin phenomenon, and it appears to be already on the wane. The Electronic Frontier Foundation, which had initially championed the Bitcoin, has now stopped accepting donations in Bitcoins because of confusion over the legality and security of the digital currency. My concern continues to be this activity called Bitcoin mining, which is tying up a lot of people's computers in cryptographic processing on these mystery blocks that are sent to your machine, and you do whatever it is your machine does on them, and if you do it right, you get a Bitcoin. That's where this whole thing's coming from. I am still concerned that we were looking at a gigantic distributed cryptographic key breaker, because public key cryptography is very secure, but it's not unbreakable. You can get back from the public key to the private key if you have enough computer power. And if you get that private key, then you can spoof the computer system and say, I'm really the Bank of America, send a couple of $1 million over here. And so I think until we have further examination of exactly what this process involved, I'm just happy that people are turning away from this thing and seeing it as the smell of tulips that I really felt that it was going to be here. Now, over at the BBC, they may lose a very prestigious TV award they won over a segment they did in the Primark Panorama expose. They basically went in talking about child labor in India and how horrible it was, and they won an award for this expose about how terrible, the child labor situation was, and it turned out it was a fake. They were using fake footage. They were staging things to put on the show and present as real. And you would think after the embarrassment of things like the ABC Food Lion scandal, where they sent ABC producers to get jobs at the market and then do the things that ABC wanted to say, oh, Food Lion is bad. That was a huge lawsuit over that thing. And so why do the BBC and the corporate media keep on doing these things? Well, they're trying to build ratings. That's part of it. But the other part of it is they're serving somebody's agenda. In the case of the Food Lion situation, ABC was trying to help the union get into Food Lion, which was refusing to unionize, and that's their choice. That is their choice. And ABC was helping the union create a political climate in which Food Lion would be forced to unionize or continue to have these ersatz exposés. And the media will do this. The media, it's about they're selling you things. They're selling you lies to serve somebody's agenda and interest. And by the way, as long as we're getting close to the end of the show, I do want to say a special thank you to everybody who responded to our little fundraising drive over the weekend and got us through the crisis of having to transition from one ad agency to basically we've taken over ourselves, and we've got clients coming in. So the problem is solved, and we're not going to have to do this kind of a beg again. But one more time, it's wonderful to see people get together and support the alternative media this way, because we understand the people who lie to you, they get a lot of money to do it. When Jim Cramer gets up there and says, oh, Fukushima's not going to be another Chernobyl, he's being paid a lot of money to do that. When Ann Coulter goes out there and says, radiation is good for you, she's being paid a lot of money to do that. All those corporate media people who are out there saying Saddam has got weapons of mass destruction, they were paid lots of money to do that. They have wealth and privilege and access and perks and fancy cars. Lying is big business in the United States of America. Whether it's, when Hill and Knowlton, when they did that whole stolen incubator thing, they got paid lots of money. Lies get a lot of money in the United States of America. Lying to the public is the only growth industry we've got left. But those of us who are out here trying to get the truth out there, we're running on the fumes and on spare change, and every time the little money gets together to stand up to the big money, progress gets made. So for those of you who chipped in over the weekend, I really thank you, because you got us through a very, very tight situation, and I'm very, very glad for that, and I remember who it is I'm really working for when I'm here doing what I want to do. Let's see. We had the gentleman in New Hampshire who set fire to himself because of a court decision as a form of protest. The media really didn't cover that very much. Rochester police arrest women for videotaping them from her front yard, and we're getting to the situation where even though the courts have said that you have a right to videotape or take pictures of anything happening in a public space, the police are basically arresting you, taking your camera. In some cases, they're physically abusive, and then when you are released a couple of hours later, they say, gee, we're really sorry. We thought we had, and it's just thuggism. It's just more thuggism that's going on there. A lot of stinky badges out there. Crime is going up all across the country. People are turning to firearms for self-defense because the police won't show up. They're too busy writing speeding tickets. We have that problem here in Hawaii. And let's see, there was a story up out of Detroit. This is from a few days back. I didn't get to it. I'm going to get to it to end today's show. There was a man in prison for 25 years for the crime of rape. Remember what I was talking about, the feminazis and the rape hysteria in the 1990s. So this guy goes to jail for rape for 25 years. Scientific testing has now proven that this man could not have been the rapist. The prosecutor, who doesn't want to lose her conviction record, is refusing to accept the scientific evidence that it wasn't him, and says, the victim identified him, that makes it sure in my case. And we're seeing more and more of this around, where even when the scientific evidence is saying this guy is innocent, the feminists are out there saying, no, he's got to be guilty. Rape is such a serious crime, even innocence shouldn't be a defense. And innocent men are in jail for this thing. All right, that's it for our show. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Rense Radio Network. Until then, stay safe, stay well, stay angry, stay skeptical, and aloha, America.